And just so you know, if you have a question that you would like us to address, you can email them to Denise at cathedral@holytrinity-holycross.org. And if your question is picked, at the end of each month, we will draw one of those questioners out of a hat, and you'll get a gift certificate for nuggets at Chick-fil-A, or for whatever you want. So this is nuggets, liturgical nuggets. So actually, there are two questions here on this initial list we have that are very similar. One, why are different colored vestments worn throughout the year? And two, what is the meaning behind the color of the priest's vestments? So this seems to be a topic of intrigue. So I can say this about the color of the vestments. Originally, all Christians, of course, in the first century early on, there wasn't really much infant baptism yet because Christianity hadn't been established. Most of the people becoming Christian were adults, and they made a decision for Christ, and they were baptized. And when they were baptized, they were given a new robe, a new white, clean robe. And so the first priests actually, they would wear this baptismal robe, the white clean robe symbolizing this purity, this light, this newness of life. And they would wear their baptismal robe when they celebrated the Eucharist with the early Christians in the first century. And so this was the model for our vestments to this day. Over time, other pieces were added to it to symbolize the office of the priest or the deacon or the bishop, and color was added to it for ornamentation. And in the Byzantine tradition, our Greek tradition, and the early tradition of the Orthodox Church, there were really only two color distinctions. You had light and you had dark, and that was it. So light was for the resurrection, and dark was for fasting periods. So the darker colors, for example, that you're used to seeing during Lent and during Holy Week, this would be for periods of fasting or mourning, and that's really the only time we wear those darker colors. Darker being defined later as black and purple. Really, black and purple in the Byzantine tradition are the two dark colors associated with fasting, and then every other color is associated as light, as a light color. And so it's appropriate for basically any time of year. So that's for the Byzantine tradition. Now, there's a kind of, you could say it's more art than science, that certain traditions with a small t developed, but they're not hard and fast rules for the colors. So for example, red in particular tends to be worn for martyrs. Symbolism is obvious, the blood. Blue tends to be associated with the Mother of God. So you'll notice perhaps that we'll tend to wear blue on feasts of the Mother of God. Or for example, we celebrated St. Nicholas recently, and I chose to wear blue because St. Nicholas, and this is kind of a small t tradition, because St. Nicholas is associated, he wasn't a martyr, and he's associated with the sea. He's the patron saint of sailors in particular. So the blue goes with the sea. I mean, so there's nothing like profoundly theological necessarily in the choices. Let's see, what else could you say? White, white and gold tend to be up above all the resurrectional colors, so especially on Sunday. But it doesn't have to be. Now, that being said, in the Western tradition, another tradition developed in Western Christianity that was more, over time became more categorized. So in the Western tradition, they actually have kind of rules for which color is worn on which day. This is never really part of the Orthodox tradition, except for much later, I would say probably in the 17th or 18th century, when you had the reforms of Peter the so-called Great in Russia. He brought in a lot of kind of Western influence into the Russian Orthodox Church. And so in the Russian Orthodox Church today, you'll see kind of rubrics or set out what color you wear for certain feasts. And there's kind of an imitation of the Western tradition, but it wasn't part of original Orthodox, and it's not part of our Byzantine or Greek tradition. So, does that explain it? Long explanation.
I have a technical question.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed that when y'all come out, and we have 2 or 3 priests sometimes, so you're usually all in the same color. So do y'all like send out a group text, or how do y'all know?
So
like
coordinate?
Today we're going to wear green for the Holy Spirit, or
Yeah, we kind of decide collectively, and it depends on, maybe I'll usually propose, well, how about we wear this today? But it depends on what priests have what colors. If you're a younger priest, you might not have as many options. Because it's something you tend to collect over time. It's not necessarily something that the church would always pay for, and so it's kind of on the priest. So it's more art than science, I would say. But ideally, it's nice when all the clergy have not only the same color, but even the same set. It looks really nice. So there's the Metropolis, for example, a couple of years ago, in order to try to instill this, they've introduced really two standardized sets that they were hoping everyone would have. There's a gold and white set with crosses that you'll see Father Micah and I and Deacon Tikon will have. And then there's also a red one with gold crosses that I have, but I don't think anyone else has. So the only time you'll see us all exactly matched is with that gold and white crosses, and that'll tend to be like when the bishop comes, because he wishes that we use those colors so that we all look uniform.
Do the altar cloths, like now we're in Advent and I noticed that it's red.
Yeah.
Is that just your preference, or how do you choose the altar cloth?
Well, so again, it's art more than science probably, but there does tend to be a tradition that red and white are kind of the default colors at any time, and red is particularly associated with now the Nativity Fast, so that's definitely on purpose. I know the blue altar covers will come out, for example, during the month of August, which is the 15 days of August to the Mother of God, because blue is associated with the Mother of God. And then she has her nativity on September 8th. So a lot of times you'll see in the churches, from August 1st until maybe September 8th or so, the altar covers will be blue for the Mother of God. Green tends to be associated with Pentecost, which is also one of our feast days. So maybe around Pentecost, and for some time after Pentecost, maybe you'll see green. But green tends to be, if a church, it's always a question of priorities and financing. Ideally we would have all sorts of nice colors, but practically it's not always possible. So the most common tend to be red, white, blue, and then purple or black for Lent. Those are like in the four, and then if you can get a fifth one, probably green would be the next one. So, and we're working on that. We're hoping to get some new colors and some nice altar covers.